night. Well, the polls are closed. Across the country, here in California, the ballot counting is on in earnest right now, but the results are clear. California's special election on Proposition 50 passed. Voters chose to support congressional district lines changing. Now, approved by voters, it will give the Democratic-controlled state legislature the power to redraw the state's congressional districts, something that the president does not support. So he sent federal monitors to watch our election in a few California counties. And we asked Fresno County Clerk and Registrar of Voters, James Coos, about this a little earlier today.
To the best of my knowledge, there are no DOJ monitors in Fresno County active right now. We do anticipate there will be a couple DOJ monitors visiting a vote center or two later in the day today, and then visiting our warehouse tomorrow. Overall, the number of election observers that we're seeing is a regular amount.
All right, so let's dive into what this means for our state and the communities in which we live. Dr. Lisa Bryant, chair of the Political Science Department at Fresno State, is here, along with Dr. Nathan Monroe, political science professor at UC Merced. Thanks a lot, both of you, for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
It's been a busy day.
Here, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to start off with Prop 50, and we're going to talk about, then we're going to talk about the national results.
Okay.
But first, I'd like to talk, see what your reaction is to what James Coos said about the monitors coming in. Did you, when you found out about it, think it was a big deal, or something that was really needed, or not at all? Lisa?
I wasn't surprised to hear that monitors might be visiting LA, given the lawsuits and investigations that have been going on with their voting equipment manufacturer down there. But I was surprised that some of the counties, Kern County and Fresno County, were on the list. And so, yeah, I thought that was a little surprising when that list came out.
I guess my take on this is that, you know, if part of the approach of the Trump administration is to follow the line that there's a concern about the legitimacy of the vote, and this is obviously a very high-profile dispute between the administration and California. You know, I think if you're going to go and assert that, and if you're going to go and challenge that, then I would. It doesn't surprise me that up and down the line we would see that. You know, certainly there's the firepower, there's the person power to do it, and so I wouldn't, frankly, have been surprised if there were more, in a sense.
I think actually you bring a good point up that I mentioned to someone else earlier this week, is that, you know, Fresno County, for the last couple of congressional races, we've had some of the districts that are called last in the country because the results are so close. Yeah. So in that vein, I was like, why isn't Merced on the list, right? Because Merced is also part of that. And so it was interesting that Kern and Fresno were, but not Merced. Yeah. But I think logically it makes sense because of the closeness of our congressional races.
Okay. Well, the president has said that he thinks that the voting is rigged. Is 50 rigging the midterms, or is it leveling the playing field? Because this all did start in the state of Texas, where without asking the voters what they thought, they changed the lines. 50 asked the voters what they thought, and clearly we've just found out. So is this really rigging?
Well, I think if you think changing the rules of the game is rigging the election, then it could meet that definition. But I don't know if that's exactly what the president means. I do think a lot of California voters sort of held their nose as they voted on 50, but I think that they viewed it as a counterbalance to what happened in Texas. And so that seemed to be sort of the sentiment on the ground when I talked to people about 50.
I mean, my take is more straightforward. Like, of course it's rigging. Right? I mean, but I think the context is important, right? We've lived in a world for 15 years in California where we've had this redistricting commission that's nonpartisan. And that's kind of been a trial of, you know, it's led the way in this, and I think by most accounts done pretty well. But you know, we have a long history of American politics where we rigged unapologetically on different grounds the sort of districts, and most states still do that, right? When you talk about rigging, they draw the lines knowing full well what the registration is. California did that until 15 years ago, and so yeah, and in some ways I wish we would just talk about it that way, right? We've decided to postpone our reform of these institutions and get back to rigging to fight out the game so that we can fight out about policies once we're in charge. And I think that is what this is.
Call a spade a spade.
Pro gerrymandering.
I wouldn't say I'm pro it, but I'm pro calling gerrymandering.
Okay, yeah, Okay, so now let's talk about changing the lines a little bit. And what I'd like to do is show an example that the change really does maybe change the voice of the people. We're going to take a look at the 20th district, all right? And the city of Clovis, I want to show you, is right here, okay? In District 20. However, with this new proposed change, you see that now the city of Clovis will be represented by many different districts. Does that hurt this community, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think that cities have, if you think a city has a unified voice and that people vote in a unified voice, I think that's true. I don't think it's uncommon in California for cities to be divided in congressional districts. Fresno has been divided in 4 congressional districts for a long, well, 3 really in the city. And so I think people are used to this idea that you don't necessarily live in the same congressional district across, you know, from your neighbor across the street. City council districts are the same. And so I think that on the surface it feels very much to voters like, you know, we don't have one unified voice with one unified representative representing us, but I don't think that it's all that uncommon.
And I also would say, you know, setting aside the issue of whether sort of cities or jurisdictions should be together, if I ask, you know, I'm a voter that was in this district and now I'm in that district, that in and of itself doesn't tell us that that voice has been nullified, right? Because it's entirely possible. I mean, if you think about the way that we could carve up the voters in California, you know, one way to do it is what they call the incumbent gerrymander, where we put all the voters of one party in this district and all the ones in that district, and we make it safe for incumbents, but it's not competitive at all, right? And that we worry a lot about that. In this case, in a lot of these redistrictings in California and in other states, what they're doing, in fact, is they're taking more voters and putting them in play, right? They're creating some competitive districts that they think they can win, but that might not hold up to some swings. And so there's a sense in which any given voter moved into a new district might be one of those new swing votes in that new district. And so I think it's more complex than just saying, if you're moved or you're split up, now you don't have a voice, right? You've got to ask some questions about where you got moved and who you are and who's going to target you and want your opinion.
All right, well, let's go to some of those seats now. We've got 5 specific Republican-held seats that are targeted in this, and we're going to start with District 1 so you can see where this is. This is currently held by Representative Doug LaMalfa, and you see where it is up in Northern California, a big chunk, way high up in the northeast part of the state. Will that end up changing voices who are often, maybe up here especially, not really heard? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to, so what's the new district, right? I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, you know, we want to ask how it's split up. If that's a district that's heavily Republican, right, then those extra Republican votes that are there, they're sort of taken for granted. I mean, I'm not, no aspersions cast, but like when we think about these districts that are heavily one party or the other, diluting those some and making them competitive sometimes I think enhances the attention, the voice, you know, and so I don't think, again, even in this case, I'm not sure that those Republican voters would say, well, our voices don't matter now.
Okay, let's go to 3, which is going to be along the eastern side of California in the mountain range with Kevin Kiley. So you see that already is a huge area and vast variety of people, right?
It's pretty sparsely populated, but yeah.
That's okay. That's a good point. All right, and then taking on to the next one we're very familiar with, Republican David Valadao, who has won and lost this very seat.
Yeah, and then this is a tough seat. I mean, it's been tough for years, right? There's been a lot of very close elections come out of this seat. I think that if you look at this map, this might actually, I don't know. I think that Valadao might still be okay if you look at the cities that are included in the map and you look at, I mean, this is actually a nicely condensed district.
It is, but, right.
Well,
comparatively.
And Valadao is also, he's outperformed the Republicans up the ticket a number of times. And so, again, I don't, you know, this is still going to be a competitive district, right? Whether he can overcome the the new lines, I don't know, but I don't think this makes it a surefire Democratic seat.
Okay.
I agree. I don't think
and
so.
then really quickly, we're going to go through District 41, where you see, speaking of consolidated one, Ken Calvert down there in the Southland, and then also District 48, which is represented by Representative Darrell Issa right now. So those areas are really in play and will be getting changed. Let's specifically look, though, here in our area, in the area where our viewers are voters. And we're going to see in the Central Valley the proposed new maps. We first start out up in the North Valley with Merced staying in the 13th Congressional District, currently held by Democratic Representative Adam Gray, right? And then Mariposa is going to remain 5th Congressional District, currently held by Republican Representative Tom McClintock. All right, so do we see any concerns or, I don't know, big changes with those?
So actually the map shifts in the 13th. It actually pulls from the south. It sucks up from the south a bit and grabs from the north. So the 13th is really not swapping much with the 5th here. It's more letting go of some of the Madera and Fresno County rural areas and picking up some of downtown Stockton. So yeah, that border has not changed a whole lot.
Okay, and then, but there is a portion of the western part of Fresno that would go from what, District 13 to District 22.
No, not 22.
No,
20?
okay,
Yes.
yeah, right, okay. So then let's go to the western side where we've got you've got the 13th district, and we see lots of that bright pink over there, Adam Gray, and some of that change there that you were just talking about, right?
Yeah.
All right, and then in Coalinga, also, we've got the shift, communities like Coalinga and Avenel shifting then to the 18th Congressional District. This is one that's also, we were talking about, goes all the way up from Coalinga, King City, all the way up Salinas, Watsonville, up to San Jose.
Yeah.
That's a big difference of people and concerns of communities, you would think.
Well, and Coalinga is a pretty isolated community, and its nearest neighbor is Huron, which is now in District 22. And so, you know, we were talking before about how they have a unified school district, right? They have some things that they share in common with each other. And so now it could change the dynamics of the politics between these sort of sister cities. Thinking about if their federal representatives are looking for different resources, and if they end up with, you know, different parties representing the districts, it could really shift sort of what those two communities might get out of federal packages.
And I think it's very important to, I mean, both your points. It's a very difficult district to represent, not because of the partisan split, right? But it does span areas, like you said, that have just dramatically different needs, even for those of the same party. And so I think a Democrat, and there are some in Coalinga, and a Democrat in Gilroy might very well need different things from the federal government. And I think that's the one where you start to worry, are we going to have a representative that has the gymnastic skill set to bounce around and get the right mix of things for that district?
Oh, wow, great point. All right. Finally, South Valley, rural areas outside of bigger cities like Hanford, Tulare, Porterville will be shifted then to District 20. So that means that they will be represented then by David Valadao, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially, okay, all right. So final thoughts on 50 passing, and what do you think that means for our state?
I mean, to me, it means that California has set aside and California has entered the fight over sort of national politics full feet without, I think, often sort of saying, well, we're going to do our own thing here because we Democrats control, and we're going to kind of insulate and isolate. And I think it's a sort of test for the Democratic Party generally to say, if California decides to make this move and take the gloves off, so to speak, for the Democratic Party, how are the voters going to tolerate that versus a more progressive reform type agenda? I guess I see the results as saying they'll tolerate it, right? That this is an affirmation that if the Democrats are going to go fight with the Trump administration as a state, well, they're going to get the endorsement of Californians.
Well, I think Newsom too, right? We can't not talk about Newsom because this is a big test for him, and he's sort of testing the waters on, you know, his national reputation and what does he look like. And I think that he's going to call this a big win in fighting the Trump administration and being an elected who's willing to push back and stand up to Trump. And so I think that's a big part of this too.
Okay, and we may have some White House fight. We might find this to also be taken to court, right?
That's it, most likely.
Almost certainly will be.
Yeah. All right. Now we're talking about a blue wave here, right? Not just here in California with these changes, but also nationwide. What happened in New York City with the new mayor, or the mayor-elect of New York City, Mamdani, beating former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who had the support of the president, but did not win. Now it goes to Mamdani.
Yeah, and I think, you know, my reaction to that and to some of the other races in the East for governor is that there were some of those where Trump sort of entered the race, so to speak, you know, threw weight behind it, made these big statements, very similar to the ones that he's made in the past. And it didn't seem to raise as much sort of excitement around that race, maybe from the base. And I think, to me, the lack of a reaction and the lack of a kind of a wave there is maybe the bigger, you know, sort of story for those. I don't know that it's much of a blue wave as it is a you know, red washout, you know, a Trump washout or something in those cases.
Yeah. Well, and New York is interesting, right? Because both Cuomo and Trump have their own baggage in New York City that they have, that they're up against. And so New York City especially might not have been the best place for a Trump endorsement, given his own history with the city. And so, and
maybe isn't the best indicator of those races, right? I mean, I think there are other ones that I'd want to say, now that one we could look at for the wave.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the Virginia race. The governor's race also now goes to a Democrat.
A woman, and a woman lieutenant governor. So
to get to work for you. Tonight we turned a page. We turned that page by listening to our neighbors, focusing on practical results, laying out a clear agenda, and leading with decency and determination.
All right, so that's Abigail Spanberger, the first female governor of Virginia. Lisa, as you were saying, represents the state's 7th district in Congress before resigning to make a run for governor. What does this say? We're now south of New York City. What does this win in Virginia?
Well, I mean, Virginia's been a state where their gubernatorial races have been really close and really interesting for several years, and she won with a pretty good margin. And so I think that, you know, the people of Virginia, it could represent, they're close to DC, they're right there by the Beltway. I think that there's a lot of people in Virginia who probably work for the federal government, and so this could be, you know, speaking to dissatisfaction with the current state of how the federal government is being run. I don't know if you have additional
The Virginia
thoughts.
points are great. I mean, that's a great one in terms of proximity, right? And I think it's great on two fronts. One, you see what happens to people that are really directly affected. You know, they're not just sort of, you know, part of the big game. It's their paychecks, right? Their livelihoods. But also, I think it makes it less of an indicator, right? I think the Democrats did. You know, she won by a bigger margin than was expected. Should we trust the polls?
Yeah, right.
Which I don't know. But you know, but it is a very close case there.
And then we have Mikey Sherrill winning the New Jersey governor's race. So let's hear her speech to supporters tonight as well.
The sun rises over the Statue of Liberty, a daily reminder of her promise. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
All right, so there we have another winner, and this one is in the governor's race for New Jersey. Final thoughts on today's special election.
I think Democrats did very well. I think Democrats are happy with the results. I'm interested to see how DC responds, both Speaker Johnson and the president. So I think that'll be interesting.
Okay.
I think it's more of a looking forward story than a looking back. It sets the stage for what the fight is going to look like over the next year. And I think, you know, looking at the way these things play out in terms of the other redistrictings and the setups for the midterms, now the stage is set, and we're going to really start to see the fight unfold in terms of the strategy.
Well, thank you very much for helping us understand that and give us the perspective you have from your years of experience. And thank you for teaching our future students here at UC Merced and Fresno State. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.